All right, so we've talked about product architecture. That's the big picture blueprint. But now things get real. How do we go from those abstract blocks on a diagram to an actual physical thing you could hold? That leap right there is what we call configuration design. This is where our ideas start to take shape, literally. So, where does this fit in the grand scheme of things? Well, take a look at the overall design process. Configuration design is a huge part of what we call embodiment design. I love the phrase because that's exactly what we're doing. We're giving the design a body. It's like the initial concept is the skeleton, and now we're putting meat on the bones. We're moving past the what and digging into the how. How is this thing actually going to be laid out and pieced together?
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by really nailing down what configuration design is. Then we'll get into the creative part, how to brainstorm different options. After that, and this is crucial, we'll talk about how to pick the best one. We'll even tackle that all-important question, can we actually make this thing? We'll walk through an example to see it all in action, and wrap up with a final checklist to make sure we've covered our bases.
All right, let's dive right in. First things first, what are we even talking about when we say configuration design? So the textbook definition is pretty straightforward. It's the stage where we figure out the shape and the general dimensions of all the components. Now notice the word general. We're not talking about getting out the calipers and measuring down to the micron just yet. Think of it as defining the overall form, the basic geometry, the general size. This is the moment a part goes from being a box labeled motor on a diagram to something that actually looks like a motor. And that's exactly why we often call configuration design the bridge. It's this essential link in the whole process. You start with the product architecture, those abstract functional blocks. Then, configuration design takes those blocks and gives them a physical layout, a real shape. And only after you've crossed that bridge can you get to the super detailed parametric design phase, where you're defining every last dimension and tolerance. You can't skip this step. It connects the big idea to the nitty-gritty reality. Okay, on to our next section. A classic rookie mistake in engineering is to come up with one idea and just fall in love with it. But here's the thing. Great design is almost never a single eureka moment. It's about systematically exploring all the different ways you could solve the problem. And this is a principle you really need to internalize. A good design doesn't just hang its hat on one single idea. You have to explore multiple configurations. Why? Because I guarantee you, your first idea is almost never your best one. By forcing yourself to come up with alternatives, you look at the problem from totally different angles. And that's often where you stumble upon a solution that's simpler, stronger, cheaper, you name it. This is a fantastic, simple example of what I'm talking about. The goal is easy, right? Just connect two plates at a right angle. But look at the possibilities. You could bend a piece of sheet metal. You could machine it from a solid block. You could weld a couple of pieces together. You could even have a custom cast part. They all do the same basic job, but think about the implications. Each choice dramatically changes the strength, the weight, the cost, and how you'd even make the thing. This right here is the power of generating alternatives. So as you're sketching out these different ideas, you should have a few key questions running through your head. First up, spatial constraints. Pretty simple. Will it physically fit in the space it needs to go? Second, assembly and service. Can a person actually put this thing together? And, just as important, can they take it apart to fix it later? Third, function. How does the shape I'm drawing affect its performance? Its strength, its stiffness. And finally, interfaces. How does my part connect to everything else around it? Okay, so you've done the creative part. You've got, let's say, 3 or 4 really solid configurations on the table. Awesome. Now for the tough part. Which one do you pick? And this is where we have to be engineers, not just artists. It can't be a gut feeling. We need a structured, objective way to make the call. A fantastic tool for this, especially for a first pass, is something called the Pew method. The key concept here is that it's a relative comparison. It's not about absolute numbers. You just pick one of your designs, maybe the simplest one or whatever the current standard is, and you call that your datum. Then, for every criterion you care about, like cost or weight, you just ask a simple question for the other concepts. Is it better, worse, or about the same as my datum? It's quick, it's great for team discussions, and it forces you to justify your thinking. So, here's what that looks like for our bracket example. Let's say we make configuration A our datum, that's our baseline. Now we look at config B. Is it better on cost? Let's say yes, so it gets a plus. But maybe it's heavier and not as stiff, so that's 2 minuses. Then we look at config C. It's more expensive, that's a minus, but it's lighter and stiffer, so 2 pluses.
You add it all up, and it looks like C comes out on top. But honestly, the final score isn't the most important part. The real value is the structured debate you had to have to assign every single plus and minus.
Now, after you've used a pew chart to narrow down your options, you might want to get a little more rigorous with your top 2 or 3 contenders. That's where a weighted decision matrix comes in. This method is more quantitative. This time, you don't just list your criteria, you give each one a weight based on how important it is. Like, is cost twice as important as weight? Then you give each concept a numerical score for each criterion, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5. Multiply the scores by the weights, add it all up, and you get a final number that gives you a really clear, data-driven reason for your choice.
But wait, choosing a configuration isn't just about picking the best shape on paper. A design is completely worthless if you can't actually make it. And this brings us to one of the most critical relationships in all of engineering: the link between a part's shape, the material it's made of, and how you're going to manufacture it. This little triangle here, this is one of the most powerful ideas in design. It shows that form, function, material, and production are all tied together at the hip. You can't change one without it yanking on all the others. Think about that cast bracket we saw. It has this great beefy shape that's perfect for stiffness. That's its form. But that form is only possible because we chose a casting process and a castable material. If you suddenly decide you want to make it out of sheet metal instead, you have to completely rethink the form. A truly successful design finds that sweet spot right in the middle, perfectly balancing all 4 of these factors.
All right, we've looked at all the pieces of the puzzle. Now let's put them all together and see how this flows from start to finish. Let's go back to our trusty bracket one last time. Step 1 was the architecture. We simply defined the need to connect 2 plates. Step 2, configurations. We got creative and sketched out our alternatives: the bent one, the machined one, the welded one. Step 3, evaluation. We put them head-to-head using a poo chart, comparing them on things like cost and stiffness. And finally, step 4, selection. Based on that data, we pick our winner. Maybe it's the machine block. That's the one we'll now carry forward into the super detailed design phase. See? It's a clear, logical, and, most importantly, a defensible process.
So we've made our decision. But before we dive into hours and hours of detailed CAD work, we need to do one last sanity check. Think of this as the final pre-flight check before your design really takes off. This checklist here is your safety net. You just go right down the list. Have we really checked all the spatial constraints? Will it fit? Are all the interfaces, where it bolts onto other parts, are they fully defined? Are we absolutely sure this can be assembled and then maintained down the road? And finally, are we still confident that our material and manufacturing choices make sense? If you can confidently tick every one of these boxes, then congratulations, your configuration is good to go. Okay, so as we wrap this up, what's the big picture here? Well, first and foremost, the key takeaway is that configuration design is a translator. It takes that abstract blueprint from the architecture phase and turns it into a real, tangible, physical shape, something we can finally start to work with.
And the second big thing to remember is that this is a discipline. It's not just about having a cool idea. It's a process. You have to force yourself to generate multiple alternatives, and then you have to use structured tools like a pew chart or decision matrix to evaluate them. This is how you make sure your decisions are backed by data, not just a gut feeling. And that brings us to the next logical question, doesn't it? We've picked a shape, we've figured out the general layout, we have a solid configuration, but it's still not ready for the factory floor. So how do we define the exact dimensions, the exact tolerances, to make sure it not only works perfectly, but can be made over and over again with total reliability? Well, answering that question is what the next stage is all about: parametric design. Thanks for tuning in.